Good morning. Good morning. Welcome back. This is episode 53. And very happy to have you all back. Excited to launch our new data series this morning. Going to be talking about data in financial planning. And I've got some great guests today, Rob and Pritchard from Iress. And we're going to have an interesting discussion. And we're going to talk about some things today that I don't think we always consider and that we maybe even don't think is that important sometimes. And today is all about positioning this whole series. We're going to get into all the different data types that we should be considering when looking at financial planning. And then we're going to get into assumptions today. And I think you're in for a treat. So I'm really looking forward to this and happy that they are with me this morning. So yeah, good morning. Let me say hi to everybody. Let me just get into the comments here. So thank you for saying good morning already. First in the house this morning was Slanganani. Good morning. Terence, Casper, Kobus Klein, Kobus, 53 out of 53. I'll say that every time. Denise and Razan, Renee, Raymond back in the house. Malcolm is here. Arun, good morning, Arun. Almin, nice to have you here with us again. And then Lofia as well. Thanks for connecting with me on LinkedIn, Lofia. I appreciate it. Raymond, Chard, and Kevin over on YouTube. Good morning. Thank you very much. Tinus Brits, baie welkom Tinus. Ek weet nie how cold it is in Bloemfontein op die oomblik nie, maar hier raak dit nou koud. Ek sukkel om op te staan in die oggend. So baie welkom. En dan Niels Strydom, goeiemôre. Daar in Kroonstad, good morning. And very nice to have you all here. On LinkedIn, I've got Stefan saying, good morning, Stefan. Mattia, good morning, Stefan. Thank you for joining us. Jaco Roots, goeiemôre. Yeah, so a lot of people in the house, a lot of regulars, or all the regulars this morning. I didn't see a name I haven't seen before, so thank you very much for saying hi. And yeah, I really hope you enjoyed yesterday's episode. It was some interesting things that I discussed around, just gratitude and being grateful for things, but then also those two little words that are so powerful and so important that I think we underutilize. And one thing I didn't mention yesterday that was maybe it's also time to say thank you to yourself. For not giving up and for keeping on just going, doing the Johnny Walker. Let's keep walking and let's just keep moving forward. So very excited on that note, by the way. So tomorrow, as I said to you yesterday, I've got Sandro Forte that will be with us tomorrow. Really happy about that. And we're really going to get into, Sandro built a business, or he started in financial planning when he was only 21 years old. With nothing, no prospects, no knowledge, no expertise, no nothing. And he very quickly in 2 years became one of the top producers. And obviously a time when that is very important, but that's not the thing. He went on to build his business and sustain and maintain that business for all of the 28 years that followed that. And so I just in my mind, I'm thinking he's seen, the financial crisis. There's been 2000 where we've had a crash. This is now happening. So he's lived through 2 or 3 of these things, and yet he kept going. So I think, I'm really looking forward to him sharing his ideas. And he's a very practical, ordinary guy, very nice, very open, and he shares his secrets to success. So I'm really happy to have him on tomorrow and looking forward to what he has to say. So that'll be tomorrow morning, 8 AM South African time. Really looking forward to that. It's going to be an interesting conversation with him. And I want to thank him so long for agreeing to be on the show. I know it's not like he's got nothing to do. So very grateful for that. And then, so let me see. Then also Friday is Douglas Kruger. So looking forward to having Douglas on the show as well. We're going to talk about positioning yourself as an expert as well as his new book, Virus Proof Your Small Business. I think there's lots that we can learn from that and really looking forward to having a talk with him as well. But more about that as we get closer to that. So that'll be Friday at 8 AM as well. All right, so let me quickly see Jen and Wessel Westhuizen. Wessel, good morning. Amanda, good morning. Welcome back over on LinkedIn. Nice to have you with us. Thank you for joining us. It's amazing how things have changed over time. Whereas in the beginning, most people were watching on LinkedIn and not so much on YouTube. And now the bulk of the people are watching on YouTube and not on LinkedIn. So it's interesting to see how things are shifting as we are moving forward and all of that. So yeah, good stuff. I want to introduce my guests to you. Really excited. As I said, they are from Iress South Africa. So Iress do the X-Plan financial planning software in South Africa specifically. They're also an international company. And there's so much more that Iress does than just financial planning software for advisors. There's so many more things they do. And I'm just really excited to have them with us. We're going to have a nice conversation around data this morning. So on that note, I would like to welcome Rob Pritchard as well as Richard Schwickkard to the show. And guys, good morning. Nice to have you with us. I pressed the wrong button there. I made you so small. I'm sorry. Good morning.
Morning, Francois. It's quite nice to be small at times, Francois. You know.
Yeah, it's sometimes important, eh? Good stuff.
Good morning.
Guys, welcome to the show. I really appreciate your time and that you know, when we had, Rob and I had this discussion a couple of weeks back, and he made some interesting comments, and I thought to myself, well, I agree with a lot of these things, and I have the same views, and there was a lot of things that he made me think about, and then we had a discussion and say, well, why don't we do a little series on virtual coffee with Francois? So we're going to do this every week, once a week. It'll probably be every Tuesday for the next 2 or 3. We're not 100% sure how long it will run because there's so many things we want to talk about, but we'll manage it as we go along. But just quickly, just a brief background. Rob, what is it that you do at Iress? What is your responsibility and your background?
My background, 27, 28 years in the industry now. Did my CFP in the late 90s. And I've been in the technology side of the industry for the last almost 20 years. I look after the advice side of the business at Iress. We have four divisions at Iress: financial markets, market data, investment management, which is the portfolio side of things, and then advice. So I look after the advice business.
All right, Richard, and you've got quite an interesting job. I've had the privilege of speaking to you quite a lot when I don't understand things. I just phone 083 Richard, but yeah, that's not a real number, so don't try that. But Richard, what is it that you're responsible for, and your background with Iress?
Cool. So I've been with the company almost 10 years now, predominantly working in the X-tool space and the financial planning calculators. And I'm essentially the product manager for our X-tools and our recommendations module. So I literally look after all our calculators, how they're built, how they're maintained, all the enhancements, legislative changes, all that sort of thing. I work closely with the guys in Australia and a bunch of actuaries who help design and maintain those calculations.
Awesome. Great stuff. So welcome, guys. I want to get into it and just sort of maybe do a brief introduction about, you know, why did we decide to focus on data specifically? And, you know, that went through the discussion, Rob, you and I had was that, you know, there's so many articles and workshops and discussions around practice management and things that go on to that nature. But nobody's really looking at the data aspect of financial planning and how important that is. You know, so I mean, where did this start? When did you start like saying, well, maybe we should change the discussion and have a bit of a different talk about something else for a change almost?
So I think what's been happening certainly in the last six months or so at Iress is we've been getting a lot of feedback from advisors around calculators, being able to present in front of a customer. How do we go and see a doctor, but we've only got 15 minutes in his surgery before his next customer is walking in? How do we make things quicker? How do we speed it up? And we've obviously looked at that in terms of from a calculator perspective, in terms of the different interfaces that we can put in front of calculators to make them more simple or more comprehensive, whatever's required. And where this led is to really looking at the whole data side of things, because data drives pretty much everything that we do. Within Iress, you'll see that we obviously provide the data that is on the TV in the morning in terms of share prices and everything. So as you were saying earlier, we have a very diverse range of products, all the way from financial planning, calculators, portfolio management, right through to stockbroking and buying shares on the JSE. I seem to have lost a video. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, no, we can see it. Don't worry. No, you just load on the screen. You can continue.
It's when I look at myself, it puts me off. So we started really looking at data, and it's an important aspect of the Iress business. And so we thought that we look at how do we focus rather on data rather than the outputs, because the outputs can only be driven by one thing, and that is what we're putting in.
Yeah, that's so important. It's almost like always that thing about garbage in, garbage out kind of thing. And a lot of people want to skimp on that effort and that process of getting the right data into the system, and let's just get the bare minimum. And that is sort of where all of this I think came from. And I just want to, before I get into the next question, I'm just thinking, like, I mean, why did you want to get involved with this? Because I know when I had the chat with Barry back in episode 13, he was talking about the Iress hub that Iress started to help advisors during this time now where things are difficult and they're looking for resources and ideas and kind of things. So does this fit into sort of that, helping advisors? This discussion that we want to have?
Definitely. Yes. The situation right now is obviously with lockdown that getting in front of customers is not easy. And whilst we have many other solutions that can help advisors get in customers in a virtual office environment, digital signatures, and so forth, we also felt that given the fact that a lot of advisors will not be having as many meetings with clients as they used to, it's a good opportunity to start thinking about re-looking at the foundation for advice. What does my data look like? Have I got everything that I require? How do I go about collating it and getting it updated so that when we move back into whatever the new normal is going to be, we're ready to go. Our database is up to speed. Our clients' information, wherever it's coming from, is what it needs to be, and we can get out there and hit the ground running.
Richard, I'm interested to sort of I'm just thinking now. I mean, from a data point of view, I mean, surely there's some queries and things coming through to your side where people are feeling like maybe something's not working correctly and something seems off. How often do you find that there's a discrepancy on the data that was actually entered versus a problem in the tool? Does that happen? Just for interest.
Yeah, absolutely, Francois. And we often find the problem that comes in is when guys haven't updated their data. So if they've got a client they've had for 15, 20 years and there's bits and pieces of data that's sitting in the CRM that the actual X tools use to create a financial plan or something, and the guys do an import, and that old data causes an issue. So we often get that, and it's a bit of a minefield to go back and trace that data to be able to pick up why that error has come through, where it lies, and then obviously fix it, and then advise the guys that actually knows it's not, there's the calculator is doing its job. It's just there's some bad data we need to look at, and it's actually a difficult conversation to have with the guys because the tool's supposed to work regardless of what the data looks like. But sometimes as legislative changes come in and dates move around, calculations do go out. So yeah, it does happen to us often.
Okay, no, that's interesting, and it's something to take note of. And I mean, this is, Rob, where like you came up with this analogy with building a house, and that data is like, if you can compare that to the foundation of a house. So talk us through sort of that analogy and why do you see data as the foundation for financial planning specifically?
I think it's on mute.
Sorry, Rob,
Yeah,
sorry, that was me.
No worries. The one thing with building a house is that, as everybody knows, you don't start with the walls or the windows and the doors. One has to lay the foundation first, and that foundation, there's many considerations that go into that. Am I going single story? Am I going double story? What are the industry standards that we need to conform to? The correct mix of sandstone and cement. Do we need steel reinforcing wire, and so on? So building foundations, and personally, I've built 3 or 4 times, and I've always gone a little bit hard on foundations. If the industry standard is 600 mil wide, I've said make it 700, throw a little bit of extra steel in, because the investment in the foundation comes through time and time again. When the walls don't crack, you don't have plaster cracks, you don't have any shifting of foundations and so forth. And I really started thinking about that in terms of financial planning, and some of the points that Richard was saying earlier as well, is that we hear often feedback from advisors coming in. They get halfway through a planning tool and then realize they'd forgotten certain information. And it's always the difficult information that they've forgotten to ask, or now they've got to go and find it from somewhere, or they don't know how to get it sometimes. And we obviously will get into that side of it in 1 or 2 series times. But things like private pension funds, not the easiest thing to access information on. It's not like pushing a button with Astute and getting your detail. There's a lot of information in that, and the worst thing is getting halfway through a plan and realizing you don't know whether it's approved or unapproved cover, and then having to stop and go and try and find that information. So really was thinking, what is the information that is required? How do we get it? And how do we ensure that we're able to reuse it? The one thing with software is that in a perfect world, you only capture data once, and it's how we get to reuse that data. How do we reuse that data into financial planning tools, into quotations, into electronic proposals? The world is shifting quickly at the moment. One of the big things that we're getting lots of requests from clients around is integration into other systems, whether they be for KYC or as I said, quotations or compliance systems. It's how do we reuse data? And this has really got the focus on what we're doing, coming back to let's get that solid foundation of data correct.
And also, you can sort of overlay this on top of things like the 6 steps of financial planning, for example, because the first part is, well, establish the relationship. The second part is gathering the data. And I think there's a lot of innovation that can come, and there has been a lot of innovation that's been coming around the collecting of data or the gathering of data. And, one of the things that I think we both feel is maybe a very underutilized sort of tool, if you will, is in fact, the fact find. When you sit with a client to sort of guide you through that, and it's always been my approach to tell people, listen, you need to know that thing off the top of your head. You don't necessarily have to sit there with a form. If you're more comfortable just having a conversation and writing things down on an exam pad, do that. But you need structure, and you need to know that these are the things that you need to ask, and this is why you need to ask them. And there's one question I want to ask you a little bit more closer to the end that I'm just thinking about, that I think a lot of people that are not, because people are going to say like, okay, Rob, but I'm not detail orientated. My client is not detail orientated. Why should I then get all this data if we just want a high level overview? And I think that is one of the things that people are definitely going to go with. And it'll be interesting to hear your viewpoint on that.
So absolutely. I think what happens often is that we find that advisors do start in a simplistic manner with customers a lot of the time. They're looking to onboard that client as easily as possible. I'm talking about a brand new client, not an existing client. But then often what happens is that as one moves through the advice process with that customer, and let me give you an example of risk planning. If I may well have started off thinking quite simply, I just want to start a plan and bequeath all assets to the spouse and vice versa, which is more than likely what 70-80% of wills in South Africa actually say. And once I start understanding the level of assets that the client has, their life cover, their retirement funds and so forth, it often becomes transparent that we can't do such a simple plan. We possibly have to get into reevaluating the client's will. Because in the example I was just sharing, it's often the surviving spouse that has the estate duty problems and not the first dying. And in order to free up assets and possibly give consideration to testamentary or discretionary trusts and so forth, you need to understand all of that detail. So we definitely find that we start simple, but as we go through the process with the customer, as we ask more questions, as we understand more goals and objectives, that becomes more transparent, that there are definitely a need to dig a bit deeper.
And Richard, how does that, because different users will have different levels of data that they put into the system. Everybody has the same system, the same database, the same for whatever tool that they're using. So for all of the use of a specific system, it will all be the same. But some people put only the most necessary data in there, and some will put all the data that they could possibly get in there, which is obviously what, my view is that is what we should be doing. And we'll get to the reasons a little bit later on. But how does this make the job of the system easy or hard in terms of doing the calculations and coming up with the right sort of shortfalls? Does it matter, or or are these tools designed to get to a point where, like we at least need this to be able to do this, and we don't need all the data, or would you prefer all the data?
Well, look, there's two parts to that, Francois. The first part is the tool has some basic assumptions already built into it. We obviously want the data from the client's perspective so we can give an accurate representation of that client's plan. And if you've got all that data, you're going to get pretty close to an accurate representation and an accurate result. If the guys don't put in all the data and they don't have all the information, they're going to get what looks like a result, but it's actually going to be incorrect. It's going to be half the picture. So that's very important. And on top of that, if the guys then decide to go back to a scenario or a plan that they've made and they've realized that they've got a bit of new data that they need to add, they're going to go into that plan that they've added that data, and the results are going to be completely different because it's an integral part of the plan, or it's an important piece of data. Like Rob was saying, whether it's unapproved or approved, that has a major impact on the result. And then the guys start to question whether the calculator is correct. But the actual fact is that, that the information that was needed up front wasn't provided, so the result is inconsistent. So it makes a big difference to have accurate data.
Yes. And on that, Rob, I mean, if you think about everything that's required, all the time, the effort, apart from getting the information, is then getting that information into the system. And I think that's often where the things fall flat as well, because people spend so much time data capturing, that it feels to them doing a plan for a client takes way too long. It's just not worth it. If I'm going to implement a small policy, for example, it's not worth my time, kind of thing. And I think about things like the Pareto principle, etc. Where 20% gives you 80% of your results. Does that apply here? And if so, how do we approach that?
Absolutely. I think everything is around preparation and where you can take it. I was challenged some time ago to at a client, a large client that I'm talking one of the big banks, life companies, took us on this matter, and they wanted us to be able to produce a financial plan in under 10 minutes. Now, we've had many advisors coming at us saying that it takes 3 hours, and sure, it can. But how do we get down to a position where we can produce a plan in 10 minutes? And we had a customer that was set up in a case study with life cover, disability, and pension fund, and a couple of houses. Typical client, married, 2 children, cat and a dog. And how do we do his risk and retirement plan? And I think I managed to get it down in front of the customer. I said, push the stopwatch, I'm ready to go. And we did both the retirement plan and the risk planning for client and for partner. So not only did we understand what would happen if the client died, we also understood what would happen if the partner died. And we did both plans in under 10 minutes. Now, that doesn't mean that I now understand every cash flow, every nuance in the calculation, but the plan was done and it identified how much money the customer needs to save for retirement, or how much life cover and disability the client actually needed. Now, the only reason that we're able to do it in that sort of time span is because the data is fleshed out properly in the CRM. And getting that data, I agree, is a challenge. We're certainly getting a lot more requests in terms of where else can we get data from, the primary being Astute. And Astute is looking to continuously enhance what they're offering. They've recently moved into the employee benefits space with Momentum, and I believe Sanlam is next on the radar for that. We have a lot of our own customers looking at how can we onboard a client and let them provide their balance sheet and income statement electronically and let that upload into the system. So there are certainly a lot more ways in which data can be managed, either by the broker or by the broker's customer. And information that is susceptible to change is always a pain to collate. But if we can get the client to provide it, the client saying, here's the value of my property, this is my list of liabilities, my incomes, my expenses, and so forth, then it certainly makes that job of collating, updating, and keeping records current much easier.
And because I think that is the biggest issue. And I always think about a doctor. If I go to the doctor, they usually, and they still got that file, because you're going to sit there and wait. So you can just as well update your information for us. So they give you this file and they will ask you, well, if you're new, you need to fill in this entire form. If you're a returning patient, then you just need to check that everything is still fine. And the question is, are we doing that really like properly every year? Ask the client to update their information. And this is sort of, before I move on to assumptions, I want to talk about assumptions now, but is that I hope that you gathered from this discussion up until this point that we really want to focus on the data that is pertinent to doing the financial plan itself. It is what is important to understand the clients from their goals and needs perspective. It is important to understand the incomes and expenses, the assets and liabilities, those things that will drive the calculations, and those things that will drive, at the end of the day, sort of where we start giving advice. So this is not about like where do they work, and all of those things are very important, but those are more CRM kind of stuff if you want to get into data mining and doing things like that. So that's not what we want to focus on in this series. All of that information is just as important, but we want to hone in on the data that is pertinent to the calculations, because if the data is incorrect, the calculation can be mathematically correct, and as Richard said earlier, but then it means that you'll have a distorted picture, or you'll get the wrong picture simply because we didn't have the right information in there. And then one of the things that definitely underlies, and this is also data, maybe you're not seeing it as data, but from my point of view, data is also assumptions, because it's information that I need to put into the system that will help drive the calculations. And obviously, you know what assumptions are. They are the mother of invention. No, it's not that one. But it's a very, very important thing, and they need to be realistic. And I see somebody is asking here, Slanganani is asking in the comments, I've always used 6% for inflation. Is that still a good rate going forward? Excellent question, Slanganani. But so the question is, are we asking ourselves this frequently? And are we really understanding how these assumptions are being used in the calculations and the impact that they have on that? And Rob, I think you and I are sort of maybe of the same cloth here, because I fully believe that for a given set of assumptions and a given set of data, the things needs to be technically correct. There's a huge move away from technicality in terms of financial planning. But that technical expertise and the technical correctness of that stuff we maybe not focus on that so much, as that is our value add to the client. But surely everything else we do, is based on what that says to us. So I don't know. Do we agree on that? Because that's my personal view, my personal opinion.
Yeah. So absolutely.
All right. So let's get into the assumptions. Sorry. So there's different sets of assumptions. Richard, if I can start with you, there are different sets of assumptions that are being used in the calculation. So what are those typically? Which are the different kinds of inflations that we need to, or assumptions that we need to take into account?
So we've already spoken, and Slanganani asked a question about CPI. Well, CPI is very important, obviously, because that accounts for escalation, accounts for discounted cash flows. It achieves a lot. But that's just one of the indices that are important. We've got medical inflation, we've got education inflation. There are rates and returns assumptions like asset classes, correlations, standard deviations, all that sort of thing that are basic assumptions that any calculator will need to be able to perform its role and its job. And those again, like I said earlier, we have got some default set, and any calculator out there will have some default set because they need to create a result. But those are important up front to get those accurate, because it's the way you want to, it's in the end how your advice is going to look. You need to understand what those assumptions are in the beginning to be able to give the advice on the correct results at the end of that plan.
Okay. So Rob, is a house view then important so that the business have a view on this?
House views are, look, it's a very big thing in terms of any medium to larger financial planning business, mainly because of consistency. If the tools allow for people to log in the morning and go, today I'm feeling particularly bullish, I'm going to start projecting equity at 12%, and the person 3 offices down has had a bad day and he's going maybe 7, you're going to have big inconsistencies. And this is definitely something that's very topical across the larger geographically spread businesses, where they're looking for consistency in the way that these assumptions will flow through into planning tools. That said, it's not necessarily something that is easy to get hold of, because there's, again, a fair amount of data that constitutes a solid set of assumptions. As Richard mentioned, cross inflation, education inflation, and so on. We can usually get things like that off Stats SA, life expectancy tables, and so forth for projection terms, and that default living annuity or default life annuity rates. What should those be? There's an awful lot of stuff that drives, and I think what our view on assumptions is very much around getting it right, and then reviewing it probably on an annual basis. And how do you do that review? Who do you involve? We find a lot of our customers come back to us, but I know that a lot of the customers also go to their LISP providers like Momentum or Investec and Allen Gray, where they place a predominantly large amount of business, and they will look to piggyback off some of the statistics and that these guys are putting out in terms of what are reasonable asset class returns. And there immediately you have to start considering growth versus income, and the breakdown of income, because any calculator out in the market needs to generally understand that differentiation so that we can factor in things like capital gains tax and income tax more accurately. I suppose it's a little ironic that we try and base an exact science off a set of assumptions, but that also is what leads us to things like the regular review. And that is something that is becoming hugely topical as well, is ensuring that data, plans, etc., are reviewed on a very regular basis.
Yeah, and also, I mean, my question, Richard, would be something that is quite important and something that I've learned over the years. It's not something, when I started off, this wasn't really like, we were taught like 10 and 6 or 10 and 5 or even 12 and I don't know what it was. At a stage. So you're given these generic set of assumptions that we use. This is what you use for investment growth. This is what you use for inflation, and off you go, and there you go. And you keep on using that. But one of the things that I learned over time, and this is like, honestly, just one of the things, as you get to work a lot with financial planning, and you start thinking about what the client situation is going to be after an event, or who is the person that needs to benefit from this, is that we're working here with different risk profiles as well. So my question is, I'm wondering, how often do users or advisors, when they do financial planning, actually change the assumptions to align more with the risk profile of a client, and whether that is really considered? Because it is considered when we give advice to say, invest in these types of portfolios of these types of things. But I mean, what is the importance to be able to adjust and easily adapt your assumptions based on the risk profile of the client?
Yeah, I think it's critical to any planning tool that you're dealing with, and obviously it talks back to the behavior of the client and the risk appetite of your client, and you need to be able to adjust those and go back and reassess on an annual basis. Any event that occurs will change somebody's opinion of what their profile should be. So it's important just to keep reviewing those, and they're integral to any calculator out there.
So there's really a few things here that can align, or that can overlap or work together. So Rob, you said that you need to understand your asset classes. So, and I mean, asset classes can be divided between the 4 asset classes, but also local and offshore. And then you can have different things, and then you need to understand what do you think is the capital growth going to be, and what is the income that can be earned from this in terms of interest or dividends or rental income or whatever the case may be. Because if you understand that and you then overlay a risk profile on top of that, a risk profile would typically have a certain asset allocation attached to it. So if you have the underlying asset classes and you then apply the asset allocation to it, you can have I always want to say dynamic. I don't know if that's the right word. I know it's a dangerous word to use in terms of technology, but it is sort of dynamic then when I choose a client when you actually determine somebody or you enter somebody's risk profile, that the assumptions would automatically adjust to that. I mean, that I think would be important.
Absolutely. So we actually call it a weighted average, where you utilize the weighted average of the underlying asset classes to return the portfolio, to calculate the portfolio returns. So we're able to then understand that a conservative portfolio would possibly be projected at around about 6 to 7%, and an aggressive portfolio probably up at around 10 or 11. Bearing in mind that these numbers are purely put out there as starting points for advisor practices, and the advisor practice has got complete edit capability against all these types of numbers. So we provide the starting point, and it's up to the advisory house to then adjust these numbers to suit their business. We also get advisors practices that work on inflation plus returns. They don't talk conservative and aggressive. So, and one of the key things here as well is that I think it's very important that the house view is almost the starting point of any plan. In other words, once I've done a calculation, that calculation should be based off the house view. Then only if that house view is not yielding the results that the customer requires. For example, I might be short. I can't afford all of the monthly premium that the advisors recommended to get to my retirement goals. So what else could be done? Could we adjust the profile of the client to be a little bit more aggressive? And yes, of course you can, but you need to be able to have some sort of meaningful risk and return conversation then with the customer. And that kind of brings me to what Richard mentioned earlier, the standard deviation and correlations between asset classes, and why do systems cater for those in the market? It's important to be able to understand risk and to be able to have a meaningful discussion with the clients around the probability of not achieving your goal. So there's a number of solutions out there that will actually do a range of returns against a projection, or the probability of achieving your results, or for the more technical, even Monte Carlo simulations or stochastic modeling. Now, let's keep it simple. Let's talk range of returns. What's the probability of not achieving the goal over time? And this is the kind of data that drives that conversation, that allows you to then engage with your customer and understand that by adjusting the profile from, say, moderately conservative to moderately aggressive, there's inherent risk that comes with that. But how do we then engage that customer? So you'll find that there are things like your volatility charts, or maybe more popularly known as funnels of doubt, that one can look at. What is the volatility in 1 year? But obviously over time, everything tends towards the mean or the average of the portfolio. I've got a 40% probability of not achieving my goal, which is identified through the range of return. And what can I do to manage that? Now, at the moment, we're just talking about changing portfolios. There's obviously many other strategies as well to manage that. But these calculations, again, are driven by the data ultimately at an asset class level. In other words, if we were to just look at pure equity in South Africa, what would the standard deviation of a general equity fund be? And what would the correlation of equity to cash to property, etc., be? And all of those calculations are done in various systems that are out there. They usually will do around about 300 to 500 iterations of the calculation to ultimately give you that spread of return. Now, obviously, what spread of return or range of return also gives you is upside. but no one seems to get too grumpy with outperforming what you say they'll get. Pretty much most people are pretty comfy with that. It's when we don't get what we were told we would get, and no one discussed the why or the risk or the whatever. So most certainly we see that getting these assumptions in place, understanding what's in there, living by them, in other words, they're a representation of what your practice stands behind, really does stand us in good stead. You know, Francois, you made some comments earlier around, was it 6 and 10? I mean, when I started in the industry, it was 12 and 15. And I can't remember if that was gross of tax or net of tax. But I think what happened is that the life companies just kept getting hammered with not achieving the 10% or the 15% or the 12%. And so they've stopped projecting what they think that they'll get. So the responsibility of providing projections and cash flows has fallen to companies like At Work and Elite Wealth and obviously Iress, Profida and various to assist advisors in terms of how they will present numbers to clients and understand what the potential is to achieve that, or the probability is a better word, of achieving those results. So we definitely see this as the key foundation, one of the foundations of ensuring that whatever we do post collating this data, we do with a degree of accuracy and confidence, and consistency.
Definitely, I think consistency is the key there. So as a takeaway from this is that you look at the assumptions, and even it doesn't matter what system you're using. Some systems will just ask you for the 10 and the 6. They won't give you an option to break it down into asset classes and those things. But that's not an excuse not to do that on your own, I would say. It is important to understand. I remember back when I was still at Liberty years ago, Stanlib used to have these, I can't remember what they called them. But anyway, every quarter they would come out with this book, or every 6 months, and then they would actually say, what do they think about each asset class and what do they think it's going to do over the next 12 months and things like that. So there's definitely a lot of information available that one could sort of build your own asset class returns and think like, how do you feel about that? And if you then overlay your view on top of that about how you view the different risk profiles, or if you do the CPI plus kind of model or whatever it is that you're doing, there is an asset allocation that you can, you'll put a client into a bucket and then you'll follow that from there. So you can do that. You can do that easily in Excel, and then that can form the basis for deciding which assumptions you're using in a plan for a particular client. Because I will say it again, I'm very much of the opinion that even though it's based on assumptions, even though whatever I tell you today is wrong in 30 minutes time, we want to do it as correctly and as, and that is not the most important thing in the world from a client engagement point of view and creating a client experience point of view. But those things are critically important to help me guide my client through the right process and sort of make the right recommendations and give them the right advice and support, throughout their journey, and do the right communication. So I think these things pull through to so many more things than just the calculations and calculating a shortfall. So on that, is there any closing remarks from your side, Pritchard? Anything you would like to add that we maybe didn't touch on?
No, just to add what you just said, Francois, I think it talks to the ROA at the end of the process. And I stand on correction, but I think the advice and the guys give on those assumptions, they need to stand by them. So if you don't understand your assumptions and you're putting in, or you're just accepting defaults and you don't quite understand them and things go wrong, you're going to be called to question those. And I think it just goes to what we've been speaking about, that it is important.
Cool stuff. Rob, any closing remarks from your side?
I think it's not easy to get these numbers. We definitely get a lot of requests from advisors saying, how do we get it? And as I said earlier, think about where you place your investment business. If you're part of a larger practice, how do you have some sort of investment committee that might meet on a regular basis to understand the rates and returns that you're projecting, and where do you source that? We definitely have some advisors that actually seek out actuaries in the market that practice themselves and will pay for a subscription to the numbers that these guys put out. That's not to say that obviously that actuary is now responsible for your base set. I mean, it's a service that they're providing to you, and ultimately you stand behind them. Or go to Investec or Allen Gray or wherever you place most of your business, and talk to these guys about being able to utilize the asset classes and the weightings. I mean, what makes up an aggressive portfolio? Is it 20% equity? Is it 40%? Is it 40% domestic and 30% foreign? There's obviously various weightings out there in the market. I think what's important is as Richard said, putting together the right data and then accepting that this is now representing your house.
Absolutely. Great stuff, guys. Thank you very much. If there's any questions, you can pop them in the comments quickly, and we can see if we can answer them. So far, there's no questions. It was just that one comment or question from Shlanganani. But you're all welcome. If there's any questions you want to send me afterwards, you're more than welcome to do that. And please remember to subscribe to the channel. And we will definitely let you know about the next one next week, Tuesday. We will continue this discussion on data. I think there's very insightful things that's been shared and ideas thrown around. And for me, it's important also to get your feedback and your input. What is your view around this? I know often people are not comfortable to do it live and on a chat and things like that. So you're welcome to talk to me offline. You're more than welcome to do that via WhatsApp, or you can email me. So more than welcome to do that so that we can include these kind of things in this conversation as well. And to see, how do we help you best during this time? Because that's the whole intention here. One of the main things that I do is I try and, I don't want to say rattle cages, but I want to make people aware and challenge the way that they've been doing things for years, because it's the only way we grow and nobody else is doing it anyway. So that is sort of the main thing. Rob and Richard, from my side, thank you very much for being with me today. I almost said this afternoon. It feels like this afternoon. I maybe slept too late. I don't know. But thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you back next week, Tuesday. Thanks a lot.
Good. Thanks, Francois. Cheers, Rob.
Thank you. Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Thanks.